Right. Good morning, Wasif. How are you doing? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. It's just the beginning of evening here. Very good morning to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good evening. Well, Habib University, we all know, is the first liberal arts university in Pakistan. Founded only 10 years ago, it has already been a story of success and excellence in which the founder president Wasif Rizvi has played the lead role. Wasif Rizvi has not only led Habib University to domestic success, but he has also led it to gaining wide international acclaim in a very short period of time. So today it is my amazing privilege to speak to Wasif on this podcast. Wasif, thank you very much for accepting to talk to me, sidestepping enormous claims on your time for this purpose. So let's talk
Honor
about
to be here.
your journey. Uh, when did you realize that you wanted to be a university president?
Uh, Thank you, Asif Bhai. It's truly an honor. I have been benefiting and enriching uh, my own insight and life about many things, reading your posts and talking to you over the course of last many years. And it's truly an honor to be talking to you and looking forward to the conference in about a week, 10 days time, inshallah. Um, when did I realize? So in back in 2002, I this was few years after my mother had passed away, and I was at that time working in UNESCO in a sort of specialized higher education and specialized group, small team. And at that point, I didn't think that I was going to be in Pakistan anytime soon. But after my mother's passing, I just wanted to be with my father, and I was looking for opportunity which would sort of be fulfilling enough for me to come back. And Aga Khan Development Network, as you know, they're based out of 𝐥𝐤𝐬 in Paris. I think they've moved to Portugal now, but they used to be there. So they were thinking at that point expanding their university, which is a medical school primarily in Karachi, and it's been around for about 40 years. But at that point, I think His Highness the Aga Khan himself graduated out of Harvard, was very inspired or influenced by the Faculty of Arts and Science model at Harvard College, which is basically the blueprint for all liberal arts institutions in the US. So he wanted to create a Faculty of Arts of Aga Khan University, which is basically a undergraduate liberal arts program. And I took interest in that, and when I joined them back in 2002, I was sort of part of that particular thinking. My job was to sort of look at the high schools as well, if they are preparing students reasonably enough to be to go into a different university like a liberal arts program. But within few years of joining, I realized that this is perhaps not going to come to fruition, at least not going to come to fruition in the timeline that they had, because I was frustrated with bad planning and not really focusing on issues and areas which were, in my opinion, were the real priority. So I think around that time, not in any kind of formed way, but I think one thing became clear, that if I were to become part of creating an institution of higher learning, I should be, if not the main decision maker, I should be influencing that project a lot more
Hmm.
than what was doing it as part of a very large and complex team at the Aga Khan. So, as we can only sort of look back and figure out what was our path. So at that point, I think that bit had become clear, that issue is so complex, so interesting, that it won't be possible for a large group to plan for it, because people's experiences and ideas about education are so divergent, that it is just futile to want to reach some sort of a cliched consensus
Yeah.
and some sort of shared
Hmm.
understanding that was so I think that when I left that project, I got married in the meanwhile, and when I left that project, regarding higher education, at least that bit had become clear. And this was one of the reasons that I did not accept a very generous offer from LUMS. Said Babar Ali is a good friend of mine. He was hoping that I would move to Lahore and become part of Lahore University of Management Sciences, based on the same idea that it's an established place, and I don't think that it's going to be very useful for me or for them, for me to want to sort of change things radically. It is what it is. So I think around that time he introduced. The story was that Habib family, who obviously knew Babar Ali Saab very closely, they wanted to give a large donation to Sayyid Babar Ali to open a campus in Karachi. The Habib family's association with Pakistan and with Karachi go back a long way. So they felt that Karachi was underserved, especially in the area of higher education. So they thought that a good institution exists in Lahore. So why not support them to open a branch campus in Karachi? And I think, I don't remember the whole detail, but I think the bottom line is that they didn't go for it. So Sayyid Babar Ali, just as I think out of feeling a little guilty, I think he introduced me to Habib family. His brief to me was that these are good people. Maybe your advice will help them to spend this philanthropic contribution that they want to make. So that's how it started. And all the other pieces fell into place because I was the only one in that project, right? There was nobody else. They just had money and they wanted to know what to do with it. So my wish came into reality a little sooner than I thought, that if I were to participate in an education or a higher education project, I should be leading it. So that's how this whole thing started.
No, wonderful. I mean, you described very well two parts of it. One, what made you want to try something completely new at that point in your career, and then how you got gravitated towards Habib University. But one thing that I want to know, did you know all of this about yourself, the achievements that you have made, the way you have enjoyed the journey? So, did you know that when you drove into the parking lot of Habib University the first day, or what have you learned about yourself as you have helped Habib University grow and find its way?
So the short answer is obviously not, right?
Mhm,
I had no clue.
mhm,
No one is preordained or even trained anywhere to become a university president, right? So that program doesn't exist. Um, I was just curious about how to approach the question of higher education in general, and especially the question of higher education in Pakistan. And I think that curiosity sort of led to some very sincere questions that were authentic. They were somewhat new. I was, because being in the United States, part of some of the top institutions, I was not enamored or overly impressed with the fabric of higher education in general. I thought it had fundamental flaws. It was actually, in certain ways, was wrong-headed anyway, anywhere in the world. So that opened up more possibilities to ask questions. When you're not trying to replicate blindly something, and you don't think that there is a perfect model that exists, which
yeah,
is not the case
there's no
for
prototype.
there's no prototype. So I think that allows a certain openness, a certain uncertainty, right? So I'm probably going to read this share again at the conference, which is truly a "hai kahan tamanna ka dusra qadam ya Rab." So you just see, you don't see a path or
Yeah.
footprints in an almost infinite span of possibilities.
Mhm.
Dashte imkan, which is the desert of potentiality, possibilities.
Mhm.
So I think that was perhaps, if I were to sort of point to one aspect, that as let's say entrepreneur or someone who is trying to do something new, I think that bit was, for at least for me, became and still is the most crucial engine. That you're genuinely curious and you have good questions and you're sort of trying to figure out the path. One wants to sort of really, then you're always open to change your preconceived opinion, right? So
Mhm.
I think that really helps. So I
Yeah,
think
that,
that's what I had. And when I started meeting with a number of people in many established institutions, so let's say one confidence builder for me was the questions were very well resonated. So it became very clear that I'm not the only one who's asking these questions, and these are good questions, and they were going to lead to sort of an interesting framework as a result. So I think that if I were to sort of be a little quippy about it, so I think that for me, I think one thing that I really learned about myself, getting validation for your answers is not very useful. Getting validations for your questions is
Yes.
actually
That's right. It's the quality of questions that defines a person or a journey.
right.
And it's very interesting that you quoted Ghalib here, 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 को हमने एक नक्शे पा पाया. Only Ghalib would have used the word dasht. Somebody would have used had or whatever.
Right.
But it beautifully describes that the realm of possibility is indeed a desert until somebody comes and makes it flourish. So you stepped into a realm of possibility, founding the first university, liberal arts university in Pakistan, and it is now a beautiful garden, still growing, still flourishing. You have been with Habib University for about 10 years and counting. How will you define that journey? We talked about the start of the journey and the aspiration, but how will you define that journey? What are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced along the way? I mean, as much as it looks a success story, but obviously the wayfarer knows the challenges they faced and the difficulties they had to surmount. So we want to hear that from you.
So there are maybe three categories of challenges, right, which are continuous and they keep changing the nature of it, but they emerge from those three. Maybe there's like three and a half. So the big challenge was intrinsic to higher education. So higher education has sort of really overbalanced itself terribly around the world towards the vocation of what they call research and publication.
Mhm.
And it somehow lost any reverence or intellectual validation about really high quality inspired teaching. So the entire enterprise is disproportionately focused on just doing that. All the training, the PhD process is basically just that, and still overwhelmingly. So the idea of creating a great environment for both faculty and for undergraduate students, you don't have the supply line for it. Nobody is getting oriented or building their capacity or ideas around it. So while there are enough people who are not subscribing to it while being in doctoral programs and are still very invested in balancing the pedagogical, the idea of developing great courses, delivering them well, building a community of students. But those are few and far between. Those are not readily found. And if they are there, if an institution is in the US or Canada, it's obviously exponentially easier for them to go there. So let's say that if a total supply of potential faculty is 100, you have maybe 5 or 6 who are pre-oriented towards wanting to be part of a liberal arts college, like a really high, and whose primary mission is to build a community of students and teachers together and discover new things and do great teaching and creating knowledge in the process as well. So so the catchment is small, right? So you have a very small number of properly trained PhDs who really subscribe to that, looking forward to it. But they're not applying to a school in Karachi, right? Right? We don't even know where to find them, right?
Mhm.
So that combination of these two things really has been a continuous challenge, right? So we do get very good, we have wonderful faculty and especially ones who have been here for longer. Kudos to them that they have reoriented themselves to the purpose of the university and to its mission. But it's a difficult thing to do, right? So someone who has sort of really sat in a lab for 6 years and researched on some particle or some machine and then they are asked to sort of figure out how to deal with 18-year-olds. That's not what they were trained for. So
Yes.
there's inspiration.
Mhm.
So that is an ongoing challenge, and we keep on refining our hiring and onboarding and orientation and capacity building. So universities around the world basically have outsourced teaching, some of the best ones. So most of the teaching is done by adjuncts or people who are living in dreadful conditions and are just, they have nothing to do but to earn some money in a very insecure, while their stars are, they feel that undergraduate teaching is them or is a punishment of some sort.
Mhm.
So it's a difficult, while there are phenomenal colleges, especially in the United States, where you have great ethic and people are invested in their students and so on, but that's a very small number. And as I said, that the faculty that either they have homegrown or few who are who are committed to doing that, they get taken up and consumed there because there's such a great demand for that particular genre of faculty. And so that's a challenge that we keep addressing, and now we have a core critical mass of faculty in-house who are able to cultivate this particular culture. But that's a process which is going to go on for, I think, many decades. So that's one key aspect of the challenge. The other is how to convince a group of students and parents whom we have spent 50 years in Pakistan or 60 years in Pakistan convincing that humanities and social science is useless, and only thing purposeful to do in life is to become an engineer or a computer programmer or a doctor or maybe do an MBA. So there's like a massive branding of, not that I don't have any polite words to say for that kind of, but nevertheless. So we have to, so that's another challenge, right? So how to create the right advocacy without diluting the purpose of higher education, how to create the right advocacy for students and parents to be comfortable, to be convinced. Connected to that are the employers. They are actually better than, especially, so there's a strange phenomenon that has emerged, that we now have CEOs and directors who are young enough, or at least from that time period, that they themselves have gone to good universities abroad. So there is an appreciation by experience that they have for an institution like Habib, or their kids are going to institutions like an Amherst or a Williams or Swarthmore or Pomona and so on. So there is that awareness that exists among employers in like an Apache way, but it's obviously doesn't exist among HR managers and people who are hiring and are doing management training programs and so on. So they are used to seeing graduates coming out of very vocational programs, in fact. And then what we're doing is different. So that's another ongoing challenge, that how our employers become more knowledgeable and start valuing students who have gone through a liberal arts program for 4 years and are bringing enormous value to any organization. But that's something that the ecosystem of various organizations need to attune itself to. And lastly, the external challenges in Pakistan, which are numerous, ranging from the perception that how do you attract people to come to Pakistan, especially faculty, or this is, especially in the past 10 years, Habib University became serious about getting founded around the time and they found Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. So the timing is a little off. So, and then, we have, as you're very well aware, the way Pakistani state operates and the deep state operates. So they're truly, the one thing that they are very jittery about and is any form of intellectual discourse.
Yes.
So that's something to what we're doing at Habib University. Although having said that, there are, obviously it's not a monolithic coherent machine. So you find spaces and opportunities here and there. But that has been an ongoing challenge, that how do we ensure that the stakeholders like these are comfortable, right? So they're not alienated to a point to become hostile to the university, to the institution. We have to protect our faculty, we have to protect our students. So I think that's something that that's another classification of challenge. And lastly, I think the big challenge is how do we continue to convince society to support a cause in higher education that is only conflating support with charity. So the idea of philanthropy for Pakistanis here and around the world is sort of born out of contempt, pity, and guilt. Now, these are not the right sentiments to support a great university. Right? So nobody is giving money to a Stanford or a Yale out of contempt, pity, or guilt, right? They're giving it. But so I think that that's an ongoing process as well, because we've committed ourselves that we will be a hugely deficit-making institution that allows us to support all our students. But if we have undertaken that challenge, that requires us to be very mobilized to keep raising resources. So that is another narrative. So the Pakistanis, while they're kind of schizophrenic, they're comfortable in contributing to a Stanford or a Columbia, but they don't feel that Pakistan is worthy enough to support a cause in higher education. So I think that's that. But having said that, I think the community in Karachi has been, I think they have really stepped up, and they are the mainstay for our continuous support and our endowment building and annual grant. But globally, I think a message of higher education as a cause, to be fair, is only hegemonized by American institutions. Yes. So, and we are perhaps just about the only one that I know of. Maybe there are a couple more who are outside of the United States are trying to create an institution as robust in terms of engaging with community and soliciting their support as any in the US. It hasn't happened. So in the past 300 years, it hasn't happened. And so we are doing it for the first time. So I can't complain too much because we have had tremendous success. First evidence of success is Habib family, so they are convinced. And then subsequently, the success from non-Habib supporters who have given us very, very sizable support and continue to do so.
Wonderful. I think that's a great description of various challenges that you face. And boy, are they multifaceted? Yes. One of the things teaching people to start, privileging questioning over knowing and teaching people to think, then competing for donation money in a society where there are ostensibly a lot more emotionally appealing causes around. They're found at every corner. But one thing that stands out that as a university president, while you were describing it, I was thinking that you probably communicate with more constituencies than leaders in any other profession that I can think of. You talked about the students, their families, faculty, staff, trustees, board, donors, other people from academia, college presidents, legislators, and then general public. So my next question would be, how do you approach this kind of responsibility? Tremendous.
uh, well, Alhamdulillah, I have a great team. So obviously, it's a shared responsibility of engaging with various groups of stakeholders or authorities who may have a bearing on the university. But I think the general narrative is that we do share as simply as possible what we are trying to do. So I think the secret is that how accessible is our message. It's not alienating, it's something that's relatable. So I think the simplicity of it and the clarity of it is key for this very disparate, diverse conversation. And we would hope that all the platforms at the university that are engaging with various stakeholders are reinforcing the message, so its effect is greater. And the message is, in its simplified form, is that Habib University is addressing three key challenges and how you are relevant in addressing these three key challenges. One is to create a great intellectual experience as good as any in the world, very relevant and contextual for Pakistan. No one has approached higher education as an intellectual experience. They may have approached it as qualification, as teaching people some skill and then awarding them a degree to practice something, but not as an experience. So it's a very coherent experience and it's crucially required. And these are the reasons why it's required. And that's how it places Habib and Karachi and Pakistan in the company of some of the greatest intellectual efforts that are going on in the world. So that's one facet of the message, which is adjusted for when there is a relevant audience. But the other is that who are we giving this experience to? So you can have this experience, like, all right, let's say Amherst College is providing that experience, but that experience is only available to maybe one student from Pakistan out of millions once a year. So, and then if we were to price it in Pakistan, it would alienate about 99% of possible students, financially alienate.
Yes.
So if we price it, the price of it is about $6,000-7,000 a year, which is a small amount compared to the the expense that one incurs, let's say, 10 times smaller, right? But nevertheless, very significant. And so we said that we are not going to recover our cost from students. Absolutely not. So we will make sure that this experience is completely accessible to whoever is engaged with it, is willing to participate in it, and shows their capacity to do it. But in that, there's a big affirmative action that had to be built, because there's a large, just to give you numbers, about 22,000 Pakistani students come out of A levels every year, and about 800,000 come out of government examination systems.
Mm-hmm.
And your top 4 or 5 universities enroll almost entirely from that 22,000. So 800,000 are pre-disqualified, right?
Yes,
Pre-disapproved. So we said that no, we have to bring at least close to 40%, and we're going to take it to half of our class has to come from that FSC background. And their biggest concern is addressed, that they will be fully funded. So if you're from FSC background and you have come through that program, you're guaranteed 4-year scholarships. So suddenly the student body at Habib University is completely transformatively different than any comparable institution in Pakistan. So you have students who have a very different perspective of reality and life. They have a different story. They are bringing so much more to the community, as opposed to a monolithic group of very privileged students. It's bad for the university. It's bad for the experience. It's bad for everything. So that's the other message, that look, this is a crucial, critical problem of access that Habib University is in the business of solving. And people immediately can relate, they can verify, and they can connect, and so on. And lastly, the problem is, which we just talked about, that how do we change philanthropy? How do we convince philanthropists in Pakistan to start viewing institution building as a real cause, as opposed to some sort of, emotive, charitable thing that they want to do. So the communication from various channels at the university is basically around these 3 problems that Habib University is demonstrably solving. We have a track record of it now for 8 years. We have 5 classes that have graduated. So there is great evidence already that indeed we are solving these 3 problems. So I think that allows for that very diverse constituency that you highlighted very astutely, that allows for various listeners of that constituency to become interested and supportive most of the time.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful explanation, and it's very refreshing and inspiring to see how you are creating equality, not only in terms of quality of education, but you're also propagating it in terms of access to education. So, what have been some of the proudest moments of your presidency so far?
So first and foremost, this whole thing is a great privilege. It wouldn't have been possible anywhere else, perhaps, in the world than Pakistan, to be able to sort of approach all these questions that I'm talking about are not abstractions. Right? So people are feeling the fallout of not being able to have a space that allows young people to make sense of reality. So and coming from all backgrounds. So I think that generally is continuously is a great sense of privilege and pride. But I think one quite proud moment that I can clearly, so there may be 2, right? So there's one is that so it's the same category of experience. When some non-Habib philanthropist really got convinced and committed either a massive amount to endow or become part of the legacy, or to support these students who are coming from these backgrounds that I just talked about. That means that this is something that was so relatable. People adjusted their priorities, their idea regarding their role in society. Habib influenced them to a point that their hard-earned contribution completely 180-degree shift in focus and change. The other is a private email that I received about 4 years ago, from the Dean of Undergraduate at University of Michigan. So as you know, UMich is one of the greatest universities in the world, if not the best public university in the United States. And it's a vast university of 60,000 students, biggest program, obviously, is the undergraduate program, and the dean of it is the most powerful dean. They are usually slated to become provosts and presidents in their career. They're very, very high quality educators and general thinkers of higher. So we have a student exchange program with University of Michigan. We have one with Stanford, one with UC Berkeley, Claremont Colleges, and University of Michigan. So I got this mail, and he said that, President Rizvi, I just want to introduce myself. I wanted to write to you privately. I don't want you to sort of, even respond. I just want you to know this, that in my about 35 years as an educator, I have been, this person had a career. He said that I had never met a student as mind-blowingly brilliant as one of the students that we had, who was from this FSC background program. This student is right now finishing his PhD in UC Davis in comparative literature, by the way. So this is like in Karachi colloquial, a Nazmabad boy who ended up in University of Michigan, blew the mind of this remarkable educator who placed him as the best student that they had in the entire university.
Amazing. Amazing.
That was obviously Habib University didn't do much for it. All I was able to do that I came up with this program that made this access possible for this remarkable young man.
Amazing. Now that's a wonderful thing, and I mean, your pride comes from basically how people start seeing merit in your cause. And what is even more touching is the pride that you feel in your students, and you relate to what you're doing for them. Over a period of time, I think the alumni or the students become the most effective emissaries of a university, of a college, or any academia. You have had 5 batches graduating from Habib University, and we talked about one. One can be exceptional intelligence also. But what some of the things you think that make Habib University graduates distinctive among college or university students in their ecology?
So what we are very keen to ensure that we have very extremely comprehensive, as objective as possible data from third party, from employers, from their graduate school advisors, from people that they interact with generally. And so we just finished one survey. So one thing that stood out generally, about 95% response, positive score, is Habib University students' willingness to accept their mistake in a workplace and willingness to learn. So being a very engaged member of the workplace, which is a sharp departure from their experience with graduates of many other universities. The other thing was that their critical thinking skill, their courage in wanting to solve a problem that they may have encountered. So this was, again, is scored off the charts high. Then curiosity, range of skills that were unheard of prior to Habib University's graduates going into. And this was a good sample size of about 200 of our graduates out of 600 that we have graduated. So about a third of them. So I think statistically it's extrapolatable. That is perhaps the pattern. So Habib Universities, there's a qualitative shift that our employers are noticing, especially in comparison to graduates they get from other universities.
Wonderful.
In the grad school, there is obviously a lot more willingness in them to go into very serious academic programs. Their academic foundations are strong. Into humanities programs that are going to allow them to become knowledge creators in Pakistan. So there is a collapse of the culture of adab and humanities and literature and so on in Pakistan that has happened in the past. So this is one way of regenerating some of it, that we feel that we inherited a great culture, and somehow higher education became an enemy of it in its formation. Instead of a multiplier or a catalyst for it, it became an enemy. We have examples of some of our great writers and thinkers and poets who were bankers and professionals, but still or bureaucrats. But somehow, if you look at this deterioration that has occurred in Pakistan, that entire inheritance is abandoned, and a big part of culpable partner in that is the nature of higher education. So we're seeing that Habib University's students are re-engaging with this legacy that is in tatters very, very eagerly, and it's sort of across board. I think that the quality of intellectual confidence that they attain, because such a caring faculty and they're able to interact with people who are so knowledgeable for such extended period of time, both formally and informally, I think that makes a great difference in the way they are. Now we are sort of very keen to see some, so they demonstrate a range of skills which are very different. For instance, I was speaking to a student just today. I just met him in the elevator, and he is a computer science student. And he said something very interesting. He said that, must have colleagues, and yeah, they are in all other major computer science programs in Pakistan. And how do you distinguish yourself from them? He said that we are figuring out to be engaged with technology and computer science for all our lives. Everybody else is teaching them what's hip right now, and to me, it's very mindless because it's going to change in 3 years when we graduate. Mm-hmm. The training that at Habib University is very, very different in its outlook. One creates students who are very comfortable with a rapidly transforming world, because certain grounding in humanities allows you to do that. That if you're able to connect with people, if you're able to think clearly, those are not skills which go out of date. It's also to apply some restraint over your thought, to be able to have the right context. I think that these are things which stand out for almost all Habib graduates, which are very, so it's just not one outlier. I think that is generally the identity of what's happening at Habib.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and especially your memorable conversation with the student you mentioned, because that's the greatest endorsement that you can get from the student, and that also indicates that you have time in your schedule as president to spend informally with students. Now, I am constrained by your time because I know that the demands on your time far exceed your capacity to meet them. I will take a few more minutes because you're a person that one can go on talking to and keep learning, and every answer you provide is a chapter in itself. But we don't have the liberty of writing a multi-volume book here. We have to bring it to a close in the interest of your time. Tell me, if you could, you are a very literary person, and I know your taste. So if you could spend an evening with a writer or a character from literature, who would it be?
It's a toss-up between Anis and GHALIB, right?
Okay.
I would start with Delhi with GHALIB and maybe end up in Lucknow. Start them. I think it's hard for me to distinguish between the two for different reasons. But I think that this was the 19th century was this beautiful time when both of them were contemporaries. I was there, and I was able to spend time with the two of them, or in their mehfil when they are reading their kalam.
Yeah, no, well, that's wonderful. It'll be an evening in Urdu then, huh?
It'll be, yes.
So what's the first?
Where Urdu was nurtured, right?
So what's the first thing you think about when you wake up each morning?
The first thing that I think about is that how bad is my back today?
Oh, okay.
uh, I think that.
Oh boy, I again forgot to change my bed.
I know, exactly. So I think the first thing that does come to mind, good thing is that there is a very kind of meaningful anticipation of what's lined up for the day, because university is still new. It's just 8 years old, which is a blink of an eye in the scheme of a university. So there are so many things to be discussed and so on. So for instance, just on Tuesday, just yesterday, right? So we have our cabinet meeting on Tuesday. So I was sort of sharing it with my colleagues that we must, in about a year and a half, must reduce the privilege of writing as a technology to for academic credentialing and introduce other media for students to be acknowledged, to learn, to get educated, whether it's video or some other form, because human species is about 1,000,000 years old. Writing is 3,000 years old. Mass writing is about a couple of 100 years old. It's a technology to influence, to express, to share. It has somehow become, in our mind, we have internalized it as a natural way of getting educated, which is, to me, is bizarre. The entire scheme of assessment around all universities in the world is hegemonized by just writing. And so we were just having a spirited conversation about that, how by 2024, if we can move about 35% of our assessment away from writing and allow students to come up with a different kind of commitment, which is the reality of their life anyway. And they are basically doing frivolous things with it, but they can start viewing it as greatly purposeful and intellectually valid. So these are the kinds of things that I wake up thinking about.
Oh.
As a new university, what kind of great privilege and flexibility that we have. We're not burdened by a legacy or any kind of inertia. So we have the opportunity to really set the tone for many universities around the world, or higher education in general.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So, I mean, like I said, one can go on talking to you, and I have suppressed my faculty of inquiry quite ruthlessly during this interview. So there are a lot of questions that in my mind, which will probably in another sitting. One thing, at the beginning of the interview, you spoke about your mother and how her loss gravitated you towards Pakistan, and how the career took a turn. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you lost your father during your time as Habib University president. And I have a feel, and anybody who knows you reasonably well, that your vibrant human characteristics have a lot to do with your father. How would you describe his legacy in your life?
So his legacy is my primary intellectual DNA formed by him. So the not the exotic, but the core value of adab, of literature, to basically format one's life, to navigate reality. I wouldn't have been able to get it from anywhere, from any university, from my own means. It would have been impossible. I would have been a completely different person in viewing opportunities in life and society, and my own experiences or experiences of the past, with very twisted and very impoverished lenses, if it wasn't for my father. So the
Amazing.
way he was able to connect brilliance, the blinding brilliance of great literature, not as an exotic museum piece, but as a breathing, living thing that allows you to understand yourself and reality. And he really, it came from that particular culture that allowed him to do it. So I think that people of 18th, 19th century India didn't see literature as a hobby,
Yes.
something that was really basically forming their entire story.
That's right.
And that's why, just to annoy some science friends of mine, I somebody from Pakistan became very prominent in a very prominent science university not too long ago, and people breathlessly approached me that we should host that person, and I said, I don't mind hosting anybody, but I just want to know the accomplishment. And said that this is great that this person has become the dean of science in this science university. Since when that has become a great intellectual
Accomplishment.
like, who came up with that scheme? This is, to me, so bizarre. That when did this become this top epistemological accomplishment?
Yeah, I want to know battles behind the medal.
So I just said that, look, if I was in 19th century Delhi and I would have gone there and said that I want to really be intellectually enriched, almost everybody would point me towards Mohalla, where Asadullah Khan Ghalib lived. And,
Balli Mara.
Lohara, Gali Lohara. The same would happen in Lucknow. People say कि मेरा niece अपना नया मरसिया पढ़ेंगे, बड़े अच्छे वक्त पर आए आप. Nobody would say कि जी, there is this guy who has solved some mathematical theorem. You should just go there and start celebrating it for some reason.
That's right.
There is, it was not part of anyone's conceptual universe. People were very clear that what is great intellectual accomplishment, which has a real value for human condition, and what is just maybe a skill or a quirk that someone has.
Yes.
You know? So I think that this, I wouldn't have been this if I would have been deeply influenced by this forced epistemological order if it wasn't for my father. I owe every insight that comes to me as a result. I lost him in 16. We were fortunate to have him for 20 more years after my mother passed.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's, I think you were lucky to have such a great father. That's, that's a privilege we earn by birth.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Wasif. Thank you very much for your time.
Likewise.
And we are all looking forward to receive you in Toronto and learn further from you and interact with you.
Thank you so much. I actually am. I'm really eager to be there and spend more time with you and other friends.